Welcome to the You Decide podcast. I'm Dr. Tiffany. We're going to bring you stories of ordinary people who have chosen to live an extraordinary life, outside of their comfort zones and into confidence, possibility, and certainty. You are just one decision away from living your most aligned life, because let's get real, that's what we all want.
Hello friends, today we have Cass, owner and president of Beth's Place, and more importantly, a force. She's a trailblazer, a light bringer, and a truth teller. Through the tragedy of her mom's death with addiction, she knew she needed to create a different space based on healing, communication, and accountability. Hence where Beth's Place came from. This is filled with real and raw. She's a bit like me, and it's just how I like it. So I hope you enjoy. All right, crew. Today we have Cass, owner and president of Beth's Place. Cass, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, this business was conceived on tragedy, right?
Right.
We're going to talk a little bit about your path and what you've learned from your mom's situation, and basically now where you are now. We're going to dig into the nitty gritty, people. Cass asked me what I wanted to know. I said, I want to know all the real shit. So we're going to talk about all the real stuff, not necessarily sugar-coated, but what you really see in your everyday, how many people are struggling with addiction, what that means, how that affects their brain, and whatever else we cover is just, it's all fair game. So you have the floor. I want to hear about how you got to this point.
So I decided to go private practice. So I've been open now for 18 months. And before that, it had been about a 2-year planning process between logos, licensure, finding a facility, finding appropriate staff, of what I wanted it to look like. So it was a pretty long process. I decided to go private practice for a multitude of reasons, but probably the first one and the most driving one was my mom had gastric bypass in 1999. She did absolutely textbook well after she had the surgery. And then around 2008 to 2009, she started to have what we equated to be kind of these premenopausal symptoms. So she started to not sleep at night, sweat excessively. We were doctoring quite a bit within Fargo-Moorhead and also Grand Forks. Every blood test came back and said that she's not menopausal. So she was stuck with just not sleeping at night. We got put on Ambien. That did not sit really well with her. She ended up sleepwalking quite a bit. So we got off of that, which was really hard to get off of. And then little did we know that when she was at the lake, what she had started to do was to pour a drink. So she would mix a Bacardi and Diet Coke to help her fall asleep. Well, as we know, one is never enough, and we just started to slowly climb that train. Mm-hmm. So in the summer, I took a drink out of her water bottle, and that's probably important to note. My parents were not drinkers at all. I didn't grow up with any alcohol really in my home, not because of really any reason. They just were not drinkers. I'd never seen them have a glass of wine or even a beer, not with supper, not at night, nothing.
Wow.
So we didn't really have anything that we were necessarily looking for that was so far out of the scope of normal.
Right.
So I took a drink of her water bottle, and we were playing at the lake one morning, and it was about 10 a.m. and her water bottle was completely full of vodka. I took a drink of it and I thought that it was a joke. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so mean, gross. And she looked at me with basic fear in her eyes and says, do not tell Dad. And I was like, what? And then she kind of went into the thing of how she's not sleeping. This has helped her sleep and all these different reasons why. I didn't say anything. I knew it would send him into a tailspin. I honestly thought I could really probably handle it myself. I'm a firstborn girl. So traditionally, like, okay, I got this. Let's just take on that role. But little did I know, my dad had already known. She had been getting really intoxicated at night, so he was also keeping a secret, and that's kind of where we start with a lot of these bigger secrets that were happening within the family system that is really common. Mm-hmm. There was no malice behind it. Everyone was just trying to protect each other. So we escalated quickly. We went from a couple drinks to about half a bottle to, we graduated to a 175 of vodka.
Oh my God.
So we went to Hazelton a couple different times. She did okay, but you could tell that she just wasn't comfortable. I went with her when we went, and I was, in a roundabout way, I never felt like I got the answers that I was looking for. When you go in for a cancer treatment, you have kind of the standard of care, and their standard of care for every protocol. I was used to that model. I came from the medical world, so I was used to different models of care.
Mm-hmm.
And we just didn't hear that. It was just like, well, this is on her. This is this. This is this. And I just felt very frustrated by it. We'd walk in, it was really cold and the lighting was poor, and I felt like it was very criminalized. That obviously is not the purpose. That was never what any treatment facility was trying to do. It's just, it's expensive to furnish places. Now having my own place, I understand that. So on March 5th, 2017, she had just left Heartview in Bismarck. She had maybe a month to a month and a half of sobriety, a couple different suicide attempts within that 3-year span of finding out that she was drinking to her passing. On March 5th, 2017, I found her with gastric bypass. It is physically impossible to vomit, so she had no way of getting rid of alcohol poisoning. Some gastric patients can vomit, but the majority can't because their epiglottis has changed. So she had aspirated in her own vomit and passed away at the age of 52. So after that, I, sat with her before they took her away. And I just told her I would do something different, that I would open a practice and do something different. It is not a blaming thing. I think sometimes when I talk about these things, people hear blame. I'm not blaming anyone. Mm-hmm. Treatment is very individualized for every single person. I just knew I wanted it to look different. Mm-hmm. I wanted it to be more medicine-based. I wanted it to be more research-based. And I wanted statistically things that worked. Mm-hmm. And what I felt like worked. So I went around and I traveled to 6 or 7 different facilities and models of care that had better percentages than what I was seeing, and then decided to roll with it and implement a program that I'm very, very, very proud of.
Awesome. So can you lay out what that program looks like? I mean, if we're just talking X's and O's right now, we'll get into a little bit more of the, like, how does this happen and how do you move people through this, and do people actually recover? What is different? Like, why would somebody look at what you do compared to standardized treatment?
So standardized treatment, the model of care that we've used forever would be, an AA model of care. So you're going to work the 12 steps. You're going to facilitate through them. If you relapse, you're going to probably be given a warning and then be asked to leave. So what I implemented was a harm reduction, more person-centered level of care, which is what Minnesota has primarily moved to as well. So we're going to really work with that patient, wrap them in services, really set them up to not fail, and then set very clear boundaries to get that done.
Uh-huh. Which we talked a little bit before about boundaries and communication and accountability. And I think there's this stigma about people in it that are non-compliant, selfish, as they're going through their own addiction. How could they do this to their family? Can you just talk about that a little bit? I mean, as we're talking about communication and boundaries, what have you seen in those people to debunk those theories?
Right. Absolutely. You know what? It was our topic today actually for group, where addiction starts with pain and ends with pain. We have to figure out pain is a signal in some aspects. So if your leg hurts, what are you going to do? You're not going to put more pressure on that leg. Well, if your brain hurts, if you have pain, if you're depressed, if you are not a good communicator, because maybe you've been witness to abuse or gone through different things, what do? Yeah. How many people are strong enough to push on through that and say, no, this is what I want? We start to change. We manifest. Our brain just runs rampant. We get anxiety. We ruminate, and we change the way that we live. Mm-hmm. So everything relates back to behavior, to what we were exposed to before the age of 6. What we have learned, how we've learned to communicate, how we learn what love looks like, what violence looks like within our own home. So you're truly really breaking down habits. And the key that I have found is letting people know that they are safe. And what does safety mean to you? Safety might mean that you're just listened to. We all run. We all come from different walks of life that make us want to run. If I'm making you want to run, you need to explain to me what that is. What does that look like? How can I change my approach? I'm not for everybody. I make sure that all of my patients know that. I'm not for everyone. I'm a very accountable, very aggressive, and I'm not here to hold your hand through everything. We're here to work. And if that does not suit you, I do not want to do damage. And I'm going to get you to somebody that I feel like will be better suited for you. I have a handful of clinicians that I refer to who are just the kindest and are so soft-spoken. And that works really, really well, especially for females who have been through significant amounts of trauma.
Yeah.
You know, so I make sure I refer out if need be. I have no issue with that. I think that's also a different thing within this practice. We staff every single morning, and we make sure that every single patient is getting the best level of care, and you're not feeding your own ego by keeping them.
Yeah. Yeah. So what have been your biggest challenges, either like as a total energy or certain personalities or certain situations?
I think my biggest challenge, that's a hard one.
Or maybe what you would see as a challenge, but really is not the same as what it looks like.
I think in general, I mean, the people that I've met that are either in recovery or trying to get through recovery, honest to gosh, probably my most favorite people in the entire world, the most creative, intelligent people. Who would you be if your dad molested you since you were 5 years old? Can you honestly say you would have your own private practice? I can't. I have no idea what that world looks like. I've never been through a form of trauma in that nature.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to meet people where they're at, to understand where their root pain comes from so you can better heal them. If I'm a super vibrant, loud, I'm all over the room when I'm teaching, I'm always pitting out because I'm just running around the room because I love it so much. I love brain and I love brain health. And if that energy scares someone, because maybe that's how their mom was. Maybe their mom was on methamphetamine and she was just super anxious and running around and it looks like mania to them. I think I make sure I'm very cognizant of what that person needs so I don't harm them. Probably the hardest piece for me to grow in and to continue to grow in is I mentally do not take patients home, but I physically do. I get very exhausted from others' energy. So listening to high forms of trauma, I tend to get really, really, really run down. So I'm conscious of my needs, I think, a lot more than I ever have been with who I want in my schedule, if I can take them. It's really hard in this field, I feel like, especially because there's always someone to help. But I can't help anyone if I'm not 100%.
Yeah.
So I normally know with my physical, my ears start to ring.
Okay, I was just going to ask, I'm
a jaw gritter.
Yep.
I grit my jaw, so I always make sure I have gum. If my ears start to ring or if I'm going to bed before 9 p.m., I'm like, okay, I need to physically cut back a little bit, or physical fitness is really important to me. I love to work out. If I have no energy to work out, that's another sign for me. That's kind of my sanity time, to put on some Whitney Houston and run.
Are you crazy? No pun intended. You're a runner too.
Yeah. I'm just going to run. It keeps me from killing people.
So how, I think how do you not judge them?
That's a really good question. I think it's human nature to judge right away. I have some really complicated moms right now that their kids are in the system, and in my opinion, they're not doing everything they can to get them out. So that is a hard one. But I also have to take a step back, and clinically and ethically, that is not my job. It is not my job to mother them. It is my job to teach them to do the next right thing, and that is it. And what the next right thing looks like is different for every single person. So I can honestly say I don't feel like I really judge. And my father has said that from the very beginning, that he's so surprised I didn't do this right from the start, because we would go on family trips and all these different places. And we went to Puerto Rico one time, and there was a man, and he approached me, and he was clearly under the influence of heroin. He had track marks everywhere. And he asked if I wanted to buy a rose that he had made. And of course I bought it. And my dad came and slapped it out of my hand. And just a good North Dakota boy and was like, get away from him. He's under the influence of drugs, and he's going to go use that for drugs. And I looked at my father, who is 6'6", and I bent down, I picked it up, and I looked at that man, and I said, I am so sorry. My dad doesn't have manners.
Oh.
And he was like, he knew then that I was like, shame on you. You don't know his story. And if he uses it for drugs, he uses it for drugs. Maybe tomorrow he won't.
Yes.
So my brain has always thought a lot different that way about people. I just don't feel like it's my place to judge. So,
okay. So how do you, coming in this time of crazy COVID stuff, how do you raise your kids differently? How do you see that their perspective is different than the majority of people who are more judgmental or blaming, or I'm curious to see how your home life. I mean, besides chaos, we're always in some sort of chaos, but
I feel like I grew up in a bubble, and of course I am incredibly grateful for that bubble. I went to college. I have, master's degrees. I was incredibly fortunate beyond belief. I will never disbar that. But the other side of it, I feel like as parents, we learn from what we know, right? So my parents were trying to shield me from what they felt I was capable of, instead of letting me go out into the world and explain to them what I'm capable of and what my heart can handle. Like I can't handle really heavy kid cases. I can't handle them. I can't read child abuse cases. It makes me ill. I wish I could, because there's such a need for that, but it's just not in my scope. So I wish that would have been done a lot different. So with my kids, I give them the amount of freedom that I feel like they physically can take on, cognitively can take on, and I teach them to communicate, and I keep them very safe in that nature. They're in the clinic a lot. They see people. My daughter is very aware of, different facilities, different men that could possibly hurt or have hurt women. And I teach her what this looks like, how to keep herself safe.
I love that.
Because I think we do all the time with females, right? When someone says, how are you? I'm good. And you? I'm good. And you owe nobody a hug. You owe nobody a handshake. If your instinct and your reaction is that something's off and something is yucky, then you remove yourself. Then you remove yourself. You don't owe anyone that. So they're very, they communicate very, very, very well. So they've seen, quite a bit at the clinic. They've seen people that have been under the influence. That's, probably a little bit more taboo. I mean, they're obviously not there very much, but they're there enough. They see people, or they'll stop, and they know, and they always want to give money to homeless people, and they're very kind and caring. But then we also go into what it looks like. What does methamphetamine do to your brain? What does smoking do? With some of these bigger drugs, you can't try them one time because they're so amazing. You're going to want to keep doing them. So
I think it's so important how we can expose our kids, our friends, our whatever, our community to what's really out there, instead of numbing, avoiding, deflecting, being defensive.
Right.
Because that's our natural ability, right? Is to like, whoa, I don't want to see that. Or mama puts her hand over the eyes when the homeless guy is on the corner, because that's not what we want to see. There's something wrong with that.
Right.
It's so important to then, have a heart figure it out. Giving our kids a chance to figure out what that heart wants and needs.
Right. And my youngest has that, very driven, like he's probably going to be a police officer. He's wanted to be since he was 3, and how he sees things is so different than how I see things. I mean, and I love that. Because it takes a whole village to make the community safe and to make people safe. And I think that's another important piece, is that notoriously a lot of times with treatment, we've gotten a bad rap that we don't want to work with in the community, and we very much do. It's just we don't have a lot of extra time to do stuff outside of the walls of treatment.
Right. Interesting.
And that's not an excuse. I wish that it was, but it just isn't. I would love to go and volunteer and do different things. And I try to do as much as I can, but the reality is I have to be here and I have to be with patients that need me.
Yeah. So how many people, when you talk about recovery, like on your homepage, it's the quote is helping you create habits of healing. What does healing mean to you? What does healing mean to them?
Healing means to them at the beginning of treatment, a lot of times, is to either appease family members, appease probation, appease court, everything for everybody else, right? Because a lot of times people that are in recovery or trying to get into recovery are deeply feeling people. And I think that's where a lot of people get misunderstood, is that they're deeply feeling people. They are so sensitive. Words hurt them so much. So when you talk about like women getting hurt or men getting beat up, that doesn't affect them as much as someone saying you're an addict or you're a piece of crap, because the pain, physical pain goes away, right? It's the emotional pain. It's the labels. It's being seen as nothing else but that. How do you overcome that? What does that look like? So early recovery is really focused on, I don't really want to know who got you here. I want to know why you're here. Give me one thing. Maybe it's your goal is only just to show up for the week. That's it. That's your only goal. To show up all week. Good enough. I'll meet you where you're at. Next week I'll be coming for you though, and it's got to be better than that.
Got it.
So, and then the middle is always normally when that transition happens. They feel safe in group. They're vulnerable. They can share what's kept them sick. They can share what got them sick. And then they start to kind of heal for that. So healing looks different across the board. Healing for me is that gross B word, which I absolutely hate because I've been told that's my whole life, is balance. You find me one really balanced human being and I will retire.
No, they're pretty boring if there was.
Right? Like someone always wants something more, but balance to me comes in different forms. I want structure. I want accountability. Are you hitting your goals so you can have a different and better life? Do you have a job? Do you have housing? Because if your basic needs are met, I can talk until I'm blue in the face. It doesn't matter if that person can't eat and if they're getting evicted.
Right.
So those basic needs really have to be met right away when they enter treatment. We have to wrap them in those services, get housing, get whatever we need to get done. That's where social workers are just imperative in this field. Their knowledge is just hands down. Where I don't have a social work background, so I can't attest to that.
So for that, you refer out to people who do that service,
nope,
right?
I have one. Nope, I have. Nope, yep.
Okay.
So, that's like the first thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was like, the resources that they have are just phenomenal, that they just learned in school, and they're just, they're amazing. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. What are is there like a person that you will always remember, or a story, a recovery story that is the like, wow, you never thought it could be possible?
I don't know. I think it goes along with the judgment thing where I guess I don't ever really put anyone apart. And that's probably the really hippie side of me, that I just see everyone so blended that I don't see anyone different or better, including myself. I was incredibly depressed after I lost my mom. I lost my hair. I lost my eyelashes. I had such bad panic attacks, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night. All I'd see is her dead face, and I just couldn't get the image out of my mind and my body. Wow. And that really taught me, because I don't have any, coexisting conditions. I do not have depression and anxiety. I'm not in recovery. So that really taught me how incredibly powerful the brain is, because I could not control it. I could not control it. I could not get better. I was trying all the things, and I was a zombie. I mean, there's bits and pieces I hardly remember. And I did textbook what you're supposed to do. Went and got a therapist, went and got on medications, ran, did all the things. Mm-hmm. So, and I just couldn't feel better. There was nothing about it that was getting better. And I understand now that suicidal ideation, because I had fleeting thoughts that, when I'm exhausted, if this doesn't end soon, I need to be gone, because I can't do it. I'm not meant to be sad. Wow. I'm such a busybody that I will not be here much longer. And again, I'm a communicator. So I communicated that with my loved ones, I'm not trying to scare you. I just I don't want to be here if this is what it's going to look like.
Wow.
Like something has to change for me.
So what?
And I've just never had anything like that ever.
Right. Right. So what changed for you in that, and how does that affect your world now?
I think it was just that communication and that connection. Again, I have the most amazing, set of girlfriends. My best friend, Kelsey, my girlfriend, my best friend, Sarah. And Sarah actually wrote me a note and she said, I've been giving you time. It's hard with these really driven type A females, they got to do things on their own timeline. Don't come in, let me do my thing. So everyone had been used to me, including my own family, of Cass will figure it out. Right.
Right.
And for once I was sitting there not really knowing how to say, I'm not figuring it out. The nightmares are getting worse. I'm not sleeping because no one had really validated it. Everyone kind of expects, of course, she's sad and maybe a little bit more quiet, but It's your typical, Fargo, North Dakota mentality. Like, well, don't talk about it. It's going to remind her. It's going to remind her mom's dead. It's going to remind her hair's falling out. It's going to remind her. So I ended up feeling lonely and sorry for myself, but for valid reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then who do you talk to? Your family's going through their own.
Right. You don't want to inconvenience them.
No, you don't want to inconvenience them because maybe they're having a good day.
Right. Right.
And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, I had 7 nightmares last night of mom bleeding out of her eyes again. And I couldn't wake up. So what does this look like? And I mean, it's just traditional PTSD symptoms.
Right. Right.
And it's hard too, coming from any form of medical background where I never anticipated that something would rock my brain that, poorly.
Right.
And that I wouldn't be able to overcome it because I'm such a mover. Like, okay, this is what I need to do.
Right.
Therapy, SSRI, let's just move.
Right. Right.
And then 9 months later, I'm still no better.
Oh, it was that long?
It was a year. Mm-hmm. Yep, it was a year.
Okay, so let's talk about the brain. Let's talk about I know, it's your wheelhouse. It's my wheelhouse too.
It's my fave.
Okay, tell me everything you want me to know about the brain.
Oh gosh, we don't have that long.
I know, that's maybe happy hour.
Okay, I know. I think when you look back on the question that you just had for me, which was pertaining to how could people keep doing this to their family and keep doing this and keep doing this, you have to remember at that time that substances are punching tiny holes in our frontal lobe. Our frontal lobe is completely our decision making. So they're not doing it. They have no conceptualization of doing it. And it's socially acceptable. Mm-hmm. It's okay to see someone super drunk at a bar. It's not okay to see someone flailing out for meth.
Yeah.
So statistically, it's a lot harder to recover from because around here we celebrate everything.
Yeah, with booze and food.
With booze and food. It's what we've done. It's what everyone does in quarantine. It's just what we do.
Right.
So I think that is one of the biggest things, is teaching people that it's not them, to not personalize that. And that is from my own journey as well, that, when you lose a parent to alcoholism, you're like, how could they do this to us? How could they leave us? I need her. Your ego flares up, right? There's all these moments that now have been stolen from you. Mm-hmm. And that was never her plan. She never started drinking and was like, gosh, I hope I'm dead at 52.
Right. Right.
I hope I leave my kids and leave them, my daughter for 1 year with these, huge issues. My son, my husband of, 30 plus years, my parents were high school sweethearts. Mm-hmm. That was never the plan. You're in the good part of life, right? You got grandkids and a lake home and all the fun stuff.
Right.
So
what happens to the brain with repetitive relapses?
Breakdown of chronic tissue breakdown, where sometimes it doesn't, depending on age, depending on what drugs they were using. You're going to see, that degeneration across the board where some of those skills don't come back. And I'm very vocal about that, especially with a lot of my meth users. We have no idea when we're going to get into psychosis for meth. It could be the next use. It could be 20 uses. The issue with meth is that, ODs are hard. You hear only mostly about ODs from heroin. You don't hear about them from meth. So people continue to use until you're out of money, or you have a physical complication like a heart attack, or your teeth are rotting. But it's really, really, really hard.
Do you see the most with meth? Do you see the most? Yeah. Well, it didn't come all right.
Probably half and half. Probably half booze, half meth.
Okay.
Meth, statistically, I feel like I have better luck with getting people sober, remaining in recovery. Alcohol, I have found, is filled with a lot more shame than meth is. People that use meth, no, they shouldn't be using meth, right? It's not something averagely that we do, but people that suffer from alcoholism really struggle with, why can't I be normal? Why can't I have just one? One doesn't make sense to my brain. 8 does.
Right.
And why is that? What's so wrong with me? Please fix that. And there isn't really that answer in that. We've researched that to death, and there really isn't, but it doesn't work for you. If I told you a pack of strawberries was going to make you break into allergies, would you eat it?
Mm-hmm.
But we have this really, really unhealthy relationship and glorification of alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
does everybody, if I think of alcohol, like you said, this is how we celebrate. You don't feel like you're in your social circles if you're not having 1 drink or 8 drinks or whatever it is. The people that you've always had 8 drinks with is you've always done it with.
Yep.
Are there people that come in that, and I know you said initially they come in for other people, but are there people that come in that haven't been causing problems? So it's not like after these drinks, she's verbally, mentally, physically abusive or whatever the case may be. It just becomes a point of like, ooh, I think this is too much.
Right. Yep, there is. And I think that's the goal, right? That's why I do a lot on social media, is for people to be more proactive, to know that, statistically speaking, in the 70s and 80s, what you could do is if your loved one suffered from alcoholism, you could drop them off at the state hospital and they'd be locked up. So that mentality doesn't leave. That's how we've all been raised, is that you're going to be dropped off at treatment. You're going to be treated like a criminal and a psych patient, and you're going to stay.
Yeah.
So people are shaking when they come in for assessments. They look physically ill. Like, I'm going to recommend the highest level of care and they're going to be with me forever. I only want their insurance money. There's all these things that, people come in with that they have no idea. So that's where that diagnosis is a huge part of what we do. We really take our time in making it a person-centered plan. What do you think you need? Yeah. Well, I think I would benefit from 2 days a week. Okay. Clinically, I think you would benefit from 4. So I'll meet you in the middle. Let's start at 2. And if we continue to use, if we're, not doing well, then we're going to bump up. Does that sound good to you? Mm-hmm. So it really makes it this and then they're like, okay, great. Makes it this person-centered thing where they're in charge of their treatment, because at the end of the day, they are. I'm only with people for 4 hours a day. After that, you go home.
Right.
You go home. And that's why I think outpatient is so important versus inpatient, because inpatient, it's really easy to be sober with all that structure.
For sure.
You have 8 to 9 hours of programming, a ton of support staff. You're around a bunch of sober people. When you get into outpatient, that's where the real work happens.
Yeah. And you get back into your home, you get back into your environment. Right. I mean, I think of, how difficult it must be to go from inpatient. I don't mean that some people maybe don't need it. Maybe you think differently, but how can you go to, so thinking of Hazelton, like what do those people do in the transition period of home?
Yep. So they have a step-down level of care. So you can do aftercare. They have a sober living facility. Me and they are the mecca of basically where a ton of my research comes from as well. They run just a phenomenal program with tons of success. But that's what it normally looks like. For my level of care, we're going to step down into like a recovery enhancement or more of an individualized plan. But I always tell people, because they always want to know, how many sessions do I have left? When am I done? When am I this? And I always tell people, you need to take care of your brain as well as you take care of your teeth, if not better. Better. Because what we know about the brain is it can go from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
It can go from 0 to 100, then all of a sudden we're back in that place. And a lot of times our physical happens before. So we work a lot on our physical triggers. Are you sweating? Are you salivating? Are you more hungry? Are you not sleeping? It's not like people are running around just fiending for meth and alcohol. There's things that happen. And communication is a huge piece of that.
Right.
We work a ton on communication. I would say that's probably 50% of my framework.
Really?
Is teaching people how to communicate. You walk into a bar and your buddies want to buy you a bunch of drinks, and that's what you guys have done since you were little, and you say it doesn't work for me anymore. I got 3 DUIs and a shit ton of fines.
Yeah, right.
And what do they say? Okay.
Absolutely.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. We've all got our own crap. Nobody cares. We think they do. And then our brains get busy because, again, we go back to that. I'm incredibly sensitive. What are they going to think?
Yeah. Please.
What are they going to think?
Do you find the majority of people are hyper aware or unaware or both?
Of what?
Their body, of how they feel in certain situations.
Oh, completely unaware.
Yeah.
Yeah. A big thing we work on is emotional intelligence, what you're actually feeling.
Yeah.
I had someone last week and she said, I just want to kick your ass. And I was like, good. That's amazing.
You are feeling.
You're not the first one. You won't be the last. Swing away.
So on that note, has anybody kicked your ass?
Kicked my ass? I don't know if it kicked my ass, but yes, I've been in some very, very sticky situations, but they're so few and far between for the majority. I mean, and especially group gets very close. They're very protective of me. I run group like a big dysfunctional family, so everybody is safe. If you are violent, if you come under the influence, I ask you to leave because it just disrupts everyone's healing.
Right.
So, and everyone I feel like is pretty respectful of that. You have that few and far in between that just like to push.
Right.
And that's human nature. Who doesn't?
Anything else that's on your mind? Anything that you want to share? Nuggets or what you want to leave people with?
I don't know. There's so much. I don't know. What about you? Where's your head at?
Well,
I think racing.
Yes, it's racing just like yours is. I think just in my work, in any time we can bring something, trauma, problem into the light, it can be healed, right? And so how can we continue not only to keep the person in the light or to move them from their darkness or their shadow, I say their shadow side, into the light, but even just addiction as a whole, like it is so in the dark. It is not, nobody wants to talk about anything. It is, so I think some of it is making it not normal, but having a real conversation about what it looks like, having a real conversation that human is a person with a heart, with feelings, I think is like the most important part, so that we can bring it into the light so that person can heal. And, just like one of the most important parts, I guess, is just having a conversation that we can start to understand what that person's going through, what that family is going through. Because I've always seen it as a scary world. Somebody addicted is a scary person, but I was in a bubble growing up too, just like you were. And I'm not saying there's nothing negative about that, but I didn't see it. Like, I think of your kids, you bringing home situations that teach them about empathy, right? About self-care, about communication is the best thing that you can do to change how they think, and they're going to start to change their circles.
Well, and I think, a huge thing of development that we consistently do with kids, especially when we talk about drugs, is what do we do when we teach our kiddos? We lead from fear, right? So we say, don't do drugs. You'll die, you'll be homeless, and we'll never talk to you again. When that's not the reality. The reality is we need to talk to our children about the fact that the drugs that are now on the streets versus when they were on the streets in the 80s and 90s when we grew up are 10 times more powerful. There's no second chances. And that's something I communicate with my kids all the time. There are no second chances with some of these drugs because they are so amazing. You will love them.
Yeah.
And you will chase that for the rest of your life. Instead of leading with fear, going, well, if you do, because what are we leading from? We're leading from our own ego, right? We just don't want them to try anything because I don't want that. I mean, my kids go to Oak Grove. Can you imagine if the drug counselor had a kiddo that was on drugs?
Right.
And the reality is, I don't care. I'm trying to raise good humans. I could give 2 flying F's what you think.
Right.
But we lead from that. And I've done a ton of self-work on myself because I don't want my kids to feel like, well, I have the counselor for the mom, so I have to be perfect. But you're not perfect. You're flawed. You're supposed to be flawed. You're supposed to learn. And that's the expectation moving forward. Is that you're supposed to make mistakes. I hope you make 1,000,000.
Right.
Just because your mama does this doesn't mean that I haven't had my own mistakes and my own goals and my own journey of working through so many things. And I think that goes hand in hand with sometimes this field is very, very lonely because nobody wants to hear about what I do. They want us to fix it. Yeah. But they don't truly want to know the nitty gritty of what is sometimes in the Fargo-Moorhead area. So, and that gets lonely because you kind of want to come home and be like, listen to this crap.
Right. You for sure want to vent. Absolutely.
But then what people meet you with is, oh, bless your soul. Oh, you're doing such good work.
Right.
And you're like, no, I'm not saying that, but this is really crazy.
Right. Well, right. That's what I mean, yes, bless your soul. We need more people like you, but my questions are how do you get through a day some days?
Right. But my brain just works different, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I love it. I'm fascinated by the human brain. I love sitting with people and their pain and then watching these little seeds that you plant grow. All of a sudden they have jobs and they get kids back. I mean, we've gotten, I think, 19 babies back this year so far, to moms that are just doing amazing, and are still in care and can bond, because who would they be if their rights were terminated?
Right.
We just see a crap mom and we're like, well, terminate her rights. Well, what is she left with?
Right.
Have you ever had your kid taken away from you, whether you deserved it or not?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, the goal is to reunite, and if they still can't, that's a different story. That's where foster parents are absolutely amazing. But if we can get her some new skills, let's do that. Women are amazingly strong. Yeah. In my dream world, I would have a women's clinic. Like, that would be my dream.
Oh God, that'd be so awesome.
Yeah, because
women imagine then if all those women were adjusted?
I know. Right. And I get adjusted every week.
Yeah.
I'm a big freak for that. Like, my hips get off, which you taught me that's where like power is, right?
Yeah. Yes. Sexual power, feminine power. Mm-hmm.
Yep. My hips are always about a half an inch off.
But then the key is being aware of what that even means, right? And that's why I asked about hyper-vigilant brain and a hypo-vigilant brain. Right?
No, they have no idea what they're feeling. They're just always, everything is good. What do you need to hear so I can get through with this? What do you want me to say? What's the textbook answer? Because people do treatment about 7 to 10 times. They either get it or they pass away.
Really? For real?
Mm-hmm. Like, so you're going to keep moving. You're going to get it or you're not going to get it. And that's what I always tell people. Like, you can think I want your insurance money all you want, but I hope to God I never see you here again. Right. Like, and if I do, you are healthy.
Exactly.
And anyone who's worked with insurance, they don't pay. So,
right.
Yeah, that's a really good joke.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I actually think one of my favorite quotes out of this is, we're supposed to be flawed. Mm-hmm. I hope you make 1,000,000 mistakes. Obviously, maybe not in everybody that you're mentoring and coaching through this process, but oh my gosh, I think if we could normalize imperfection, just imagine where we could go.
To come be truth tellers. I had a group this morning, and weekends are hard. People are lonely. They're cutting everybody off, right? We're isolating. I've been teaching them not to isolate.
Oh my gosh.
Completely isolated. So we teach people to come in and to tell the truth. So a couple of them came in and said, I took 1 hit of meth this weekend. Fan-freaking-tastic. You didn't smoke an entire bowl. And you told me the truth. Right. Look at your progress. Look at the goal.
Right.
We don't sit and beat ourselves up. And they're like, oh, really? So again, they feel safe and they know that they can come in and be like, oh, what were you feeling when you did that? Well, I was bored and lonely and I'm really worried about money. And it made my head stop for 6 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
Right. That's what everyone's working on
right now. Yeah, we numb the pain.
We just don't have access to meth.
Yeah, right. No, once you're in that world, it's not that hard.
Right. And we have our own numbing behaviors. We have, I just did a webinar.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. Even just less faux pas. I mean, reading, taking a bath, taking naps. all of that, then that's all numbing behaviors. It's just looks different. But as soon as we can start to be aware of what the triggers are, after that, it's going to go into what you said, and then it's going into that next level. So,
well, you take power for, you take responsibility for the thing that has given you power. Addiction is incredibly powerful. Mental health is really powerful. So we have to take that back so we don't quantum leap kind of back into that same person over and over again, because that person's really easy to fall into. The one that walks into the room and says, hey, I'm a little bit broken, and I always start group with that. They always say, I always do like a Q&A on Fridays, like, what's something you want to know about me and what's their thing? And they always say, like, what's the one thing you want to change? And I'm like, I run super hot. I am spicy. Like, I am pitted to my soul. Like, I can go from 0 to 100 real quick and not think anything of it. I'm like, I would love that. I would love to be this calm cucumber. I think I would. That's like, I enjoy long walks and baths. Like, no. Let's run. Let's go at quantum speed, So that's my goal. My goal is to slow down so I don't burn out. And so I'm taking care of myself so I can be a mom to my 3 kids and, be a good friend and all the things.
Right.
Because I know that I can burn out.
Right. So thank you.
You're so welcome.
I just think this brings to the light a lot of healing that can start to happen, whether people have a loved one that's struggling or they're struggling, and you normalize the coming out process so people don't need to feel shame. And I think there's so much healing in just that acknowledgement that they want to be better. Thanks for listening, friends. As I told you, it was real, it was raw, and I hope it shines a light on what some people are going through, what some households are dealing with, so we can live a bit more in empathy. I love her perspective, her style, her communication, not only at Beth's place, but in her life, with her kids, with her family. One of the favorite parts of this was we're supposed to be flawed, not perfect. And I hope you make a million mistakes trying to do that. And in that, you're going to figure out what makes your heart the most happy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening and being willing to go all in. Ditch the excuses and the comfort zones and make a decision that nothing can stop you. You can find the show notes below, and I'd love for you to share, subscribe, and rate this podcast, but only if you love it.